Hey guys, how's it going? Value Venture Investing here today. So today we're going to be talking about Apple, specifically Q2 of 2022. Apple just released their earnings this week. So in this video, we're going to go through their earnings. We're going to talk about whether they're good, what was bad. Apple's pulling back. Why is Apple pulling back? What's kind of going on in the markets a little bit. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel here, guys. Taking a look at the stock this week, hasn't been holding up the best. After hours, after these earnings, Apple's up quite a bit, and then on Friday here they just got hammered. So in terms of what actually happened on the earnings, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through the earnings. I listened to the conference call. We're going to go through the good, we're going to go through the bad, and then we're going to go into their financials a little bit if you guys are going to stick around to the end. So the top line item here, revenue was $97.27 billion. That was versus an estimated $93.98, so almost a $94 billion. Wow, another almost $100 billion quarter. I say this every video, so I don't want to keep saying this. How can Apple keep blowing this out of the park? We'll get into that in a little bit, but wow. EPS was $1.52 per share versus an expected of $1.42. Another huge beat there as well. Gross margin is about 43.7%. We will talk about that a little bit later in terms of what contributed to this. iPhone revenue was $50.57 billion versus an estimated $49.16. So solid beat there again. The concern was always, is Apple's growth in the iPhone is going to stop? It still hasn't stopped. One sore spot again here was the iPad revenue, $7.65 billion in the quarter versus an estimated $7.19. And I actually had to fix this because it was actually a beat. I put it as a loss, but yeah, iPad revenue 7.65 versus an estimated 7.19 billion. Of course, they still said that there was some supply constraint issues with that. Mac revenue was, this Mac revenue has always just been the last several quarters because of the new M1 chips here. Unreal, over $10 billion. $10.43 billion versus an estimated $9.23 billion. So another huge beat there. And again, I think I know why, and I think that's going to continue to be a really strong spot because that used to be something that Apple was struggling with for a while. Services revenue here, my darling, almost $20 billion, $19.82 billion versus an estimated of $19.72. So another beat there as well. Might be decelerating a little bit, but they were talking about that before as well. And wearables, home, and accessories revenue is $8.8 billion versus an estimated $8.98 billion. So a little bit of not meeting expectations there a little bit. But again, it still remains strong. Cash position at the end of the quarter was $192.73 billion. And a reminder, Apple's trying to be net cash neutral going forward here. In terms of the conference call here, let's talk about the good, then we're going to talk about the bad. So the good being, the board authorized another $90 billion share buybacks. Of course, that's going to boost EPS. They also are going to increase the dividend by 5%. I don't remember them talking about this before, but they're saying they're going to do it on an annual basis going forward. So, Apple's not a huge dividend stock or anything like that, but I really like to hear that. And I love buybacks. Acquisitions might be better, but we're going to get into that a little bit here as well. Specifically, Tim Cook said, I don't want to go through my list. So one of the analysts actually asked him about acquisitions, right? This kind of made me think a little bit. I've never really heard him use language like that before. Maybe I'm just looking way too much into this, but we do know that they're always looking at companies, and he didn't want to talk about it, obviously. And he said, I don't want to go through my list. And I read that as in he's got some contenders that he's looking at. Maybe think about Netflix. Look at Netflix lately, just getting hammered. In fact, I actually even bought a little bit of Netflix. Probably pretty unlikely that Apple would buy a Netflix, right? But if that stock continues to go down, it's a possibility, and Apple's extremely smart with their money. So it made me really think. That could be a driver of the stock. They've obviously had big acquisitions in the past, beats, stuff like that. But yeah, maybe something to watch. But so I thought I would mention it on here. Now into the bad here. Next quarter, $4 to $8 billion hit. Oof. So, and this is going to be larger than the March quarter. Of course, a lot of this has to do with inflation. This has to do with these supply constraints, and then also this whole Russia thing is going on there as well. So that is what's really brought that stock down after hours. It was doing well until this was mentioned. Again, is that a huge amount of money for Apple? Not a huge amount, but that's a hit. That's a hit for sure, right? And Tim Cook did say in there that inflation is something that they have been feeling quite a bit. In fact, he said you can see it in the gross margin. So it's definitely something to be looking at going forward. Again, 150 basis points year-over-year growth rate in Russia. That's going to be what the impact of Russia is. So because of course Apple had stopped selling their products there. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hurting a lot of companies doing that. So again, another negative thing that is probably weighing on the stocks as well. They're saying they're expecting double-digit services growth, but it's going to be decelerating. But you've kind of seen that happen anyway. I mean, the growth rate was so unbelievable in services, and it's grown so big. It's like $20 billion a quarter, right? So that's to be expected, but something to keep in mind. Again, inflation, there's quite a bit of talk about that. And he has said, Tim Cook has basically said, I think in the call they were saying some of that's going to be impacted in terms of maybe the demand, the last price elasticity of the products. Some of them might pass through, but they're just going to have to see going forward, and it all depends on the product. They talked about China, what's going on right now, how that's really kind of made them struggle. And those restrictions were actually not in this quarter. So it was kind of at the tail end of this quarter. Next quarter, we might see some impacts of that. So if you want to know what might be going on next quarter, maybe be watching what's going on there, right? And Apple, of course, is trying, I think, as much as they can get their supply chain out of there. Maybe do more in North America, different countries, India, stuff like that, right? But going forward, that's definitely something to watch. So let's take a quick look at their financial statements right now. Taking a look at their income statement here, net sales, of course, products were over 77 billion, services were 19.8 billion, so that gives us a total net sales of over $97 billion on a year-over-year basis. That's a pretty huge increase. There was $89 billion on the quarter last year. Most of this other stuff is probably pretty much in line. So the cost of sales, you can take a look there if you want. Again, I always talk about research and development, which is increasing again significantly from last quarter, over 6.3 billion versus 5.2 billion, so almost $1 billion more that they're spending on R&D. So hopefully that translates into some new and great products coming down the line here. Going to the bottom line here, net income was over $25 billion for the quarter versus a year-over-year 23.6 billion. So these are huge increases. These are great increases. But yeah, the stock is not, not responding the best. Earnings per share diluted, again, $1.52 per share. Now it's always interesting to look at the net sales by reportable segment. Americas, they're up. In Europe, they're up. Greater China, which is, that was always a concern for quite some time, significantly up as well. But these other ones here, Japan, slightly down, but pretty close, 7.7 billion versus, 7.724 billion versus 7.742. Not a huge difference there. And the rest of the Asia Pacific was down, quite a bit, almost, somewhere around $500 million. And I don't think they spoke about that specifically, but it might have something to do with all the stuff going on right now. So that gives us a total sales of over $97 billion. Net sales by category, iPhone over $50 billion. Last year was only $47.9 billion. So nice, again, increase there as well. Mac beat it, year over year basis. We're getting over $1 billion more on the Mac. iPad, this is where the little sore spot was because of the supply constraints. They keep saying 7.6 billion. A year ago it was 7.8 billion. And wearables, home and accessories is actually up year over year significantly, even though it missed analyst expectations, 8.8 billion versus 7.8 billion a year ago. And of course, those services, just look at that, 19.8 versus 16.9 over a year ago. So very interesting to see the growth there. In terms of the balance sheet, there's nothing really too interesting here. I'll put up on the screen for you guys to take a look. Again, like I said, cash is about $192.7 billion. They plan on being net cash neutral. So that's something that's just going to kind of continue to play out. And Apple's never really had any issues with cash. Statement of cash flows here. Again, nothing too interesting. What I will mention here, though, is down on investing activities, purchases of marketable securities. It was actually down. They purchased a little bit more a year ago. I kind of look into these things. You might be able to, Apple's a huge company. Is this a barometer of the economy? Is this a barometer of the stock market? Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But it's just something I looked at. Proceeds from sales of marketable securities. Again, it looks like they maybe even sold a little bit more than last year. So just something to keep in mind. I don't know. Let me guys know what you think down below about that. terms of financing activities, I always like to look at what they paid out in dividends. $7.3 billion versus over $7 billion a year ago. So that's increasing, of course, and with this new capital return program, that's only going to continue to increase. And as well, you know, with the repurchases of common stock, over 43.1 billion, they actually purchased more. I'm not too sure why a year ago, but that's going to increase as well. So the cash and cash equivalents ending balances was $29.18 billion. So now my thoughts on this quarter. As always, I'm blown away. This was a phenomenal quarter, but it always seems no matter what's going on, it's never good enough. What do we have to make $200 billion a quarter? I know. So we're in really difficult times right now with what's going on. Rates, it depends on the Fed. I still have faith that the Fed might kind of turn this ship around and kind of back up what they're doing a little bit, because anything tech is really getting hammered, and the markets themselves are getting hammered. And these issues with Russia, these issues with China, the supply constraints, they're really not helping. But I mean, in terms of the long-term perspective on Apple, oh my gosh, it's still amazing. And I really hope that they make some really good acquisitions if the market does really tank. So again, I'd love to know what you guys think about this quarter. Again, how does Apple always keep doing this? Blows it out of the water. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.